What's going on, everybody? Today we're going to be doing a Xbox 360 case modding tutorial, and I'm going to be showing you how to create your own LED kits. This should be considered a little bit more advanced than just a basic user. You will have to be able to do a decent amount of soldering, but it's still not too awfully difficult. There's a lot more difficult things you could be doing. To start off with, I'll show you some of the things you'll need, and I'll have to do some talking to explain how this works and what you'll need to know. So of course you'll need a soldering iron, you will need some wire strippers, some wire, either this is shrink tubing, you can use this, or electrical wire. That's to cover up the places that you've soldered and everything like that. This is somewhat optional, but it's going to make everything a lot easier. This is resin soldering flux. Let me show you what this looks like. There's different types of fluxes, but you want to get the thick, nasty, pasty stuff. And what that does is that helps make it a lot easier for the soldering connections to stick. Otherwise, you're going to have quite a time getting that wire to stick to the LEDs and stuff like that. Next, you'll need some solder. You'll need some 5mm LEDs. You will need some resistors, which I'll explain how you calculate what resistors, but I will be using 560 ohm half-watt resistors. Let's see, you'll need something that's going to be able to cut the LEDs and wires and stuff. A good little pair of pliers never hurts. And that should be it, unless I'm forgetting something. So let's get going here. In order to get this to work, first you'll need to order some LEDs. I use 5mm LEDs. That's usually the best option. But this is what you're going to need to look for. First, you're going to need to look what the forward voltage is of the LEDs. Now these are yellow LEDs, and for these it's actually going to be 2 to 2.2 voltage, forward voltage. I always go with the higher number, which is 2.2. Then usually this is pretty universal, but you will want to check with who you purchased them from. But the continuous current is going to be 20 mA, which is a pretty standard. And then you'll need to know your source voltage, which I would suggest using a 12 volt, and that's what I'm going to show you today. Is it's actually going to be running off of the SATA and DVD drive power cables. And this is what you're going to need to do. Okay, you've got your LEDs and you've got your specs on them, but you do have to get specific resistors. If you look down in the description, I'm going to put a link for a really good calculator that is perfect for figuring out resistors, and all you have to do is input the information on the LED, and it'll tell you what type of resistor you need. Now there's also two ways you can create this kit. The way I'm going to show you is the best to me because it gives you the most flexibility when you mount the LEDs inside the Xbox 360 console. But there is a second way. The way I do it is each LED is going to be individually wired, and it's all going to have a wire that runs to the DVD drive power cable. The other way to do it is to actually just have one wire and put an LED every so often in the same group of wires, but that's a little bit more difficult to calculate. Sometimes you'll need several different types of resistors, and it's even more difficult if you want to use multiple colors, because different colors have different voltages. So this is just the easier way, especially if you've never done this before, and it's going to give you more flexibility, like I said, when you mount everything in there. Now in that calculator, you're going to put in your information, and then it'll tell you what type of resistors you need. For this, like I said earlier, I'm using 560 ohm half watt. And so yeah, that's how you get started. Now if you get confused, make sure to send me a message or leave a comment, and I'll definitely help you out on whenever I can. But let's go ahead and get started. First thing we're going to do is we're going to take the LEDs. on the LEDs, as you can see, one side is longer than the other. The longer side is always the positive side, and the shorter side is always the negative side. And the resistor is always attached to the positive side, because the point of a resistor is to take that 12 volts from your disk drive and dumb it down enough to where it won't bust the LED, since it only uses 2.2 volts. Now what I'm going to do here is I'm going to clip these, because the shorter you make them, the better, because it's going to make them a little bit easier to mount later. It's hard when you've got these long things, these long stiff prongs right here, if you've got to bend the cable around and stuff to get around things. So just make sure when you cut it that you leave the positive side a little bit longer so you don't get it mixed up. Just like this. Okay, and as you can see, they're a lot shorter, and I still know which one is which. Alright, let's see here. Oh. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to get out a resistor. Let me get this situated here. We're going to take out one of our resistors. Alright. What we'll do is we're also going to cut this down. Also note that it doesn't matter how you attach it. You can have it this way, you can have it this way, it doesn't really matter, it's going to do the same thing. Okay, now we're going to cut it down plenty. Alright, so now you're left with this, with just little short prongs on there. Alright, now we're going to take our LED, and what we got to do is we're going to have to first attach the resistor to the positive side, like this. Now with these, you're not going to have to use any of that flux I was talking about, but once you actually attach your wire, you will need to do that. So for this, all you have to do is just get your soldering iron, get some solder on it. Actually, let me clean mine off. Mine's a little bit dirty here. Alright. Then all we're going to do is we're just going to take this, line it up. I'm trying to do this without helping hands. It's a lot easier with one of those. But it's not easy to make a video that's going to have a good close-up view. Alright, let me readjust this here. And when I say helping hands, it's actually like a little system that has 2 clamps, and a lot of times it'll have a magnifying glass. And that just makes it a lot easier to hold everything. It's like an extra hand, because this seems like it's going to be a lot more difficult. Okay, got it on there now. As you can see, that's attached. Okay, now what we're going to do is we're going to get a piece of wire. You want to make sure, I just use regular speaker wire. It really doesn't matter what you use, but I will tell you that the smaller the gauge, or the smaller it is, the better, because there's just going to be less you're going to have to try to hide later whenever you start installing these, because it does look kind of tacky to just have a bunch of wire all over the place. And this one is also, let's see if I can get it to look, one side is a little bit lighter than the other, and what we'll do is that side with the white line will be our positive side, so we can keep everything together. So what we're going to do here is we're going to actually clip it down the middle so we can spread it out, like so. Then we're going to take our wire cutters and strip a little piece off of there. Hope I don't knock my camera off. Okay, just like that. Now this is where you're going to need the flux. You're going to dip. Now this is actually going to be the end that connects to the DVD drive power cables. And I would say cut around maybe like a foot or so of wire just to make sure you've got plenty of room. It's better to have too much than not enough and have to go back and redo everything. So with the other side, you can do it the exact same way, but as you can see here, with the side with the resistor is a lot longer. So it kind of will make this bubble up, kind of bubble all up and act all weird. So it's always good to shorten up the positive side. So what I'll do is I'll split this other end, and I'm actually going to just take and clip about maybe 3/4 of an inch to an inch off one side, and then I'll go ahead and strip the wires. That just makes it a lot easier and a lot cleaner looking, and doesn't make it awkward whenever you're trying to mount these things later. Alright, now another good thing to do is to twist the wires like this to make sure everything is nice and tight and they're not all loose, because it doesn't really have to be all loose and intertwined like that. On the other side, it is better because you're connecting it to another wire, so it's good. It'll kind of interconnect everything and get an even better tight hold on there. So what we're going to do here is we're going to take our flux and we're just going to dip each end of this this wire we just cut in there. You don't have to get in a whole lot, but and like I said, this is optional, but this is going to make it so much easier on you later to be able to have that flux on there, because it's just really a difficult task to try to get it to hang on. Alright, now that we got that, let's get some of these tools and chunks of wire out of the way here. Now we're going to start attaching the wire. We'll start with the positive side, just to get it out of the way. So you'll take your soldering iron and get some solder on there. And then just get it on there and make sure you give it a couple good tugs, because when you're messing with this and installing it, you will be tugging on it some. So you want to make sure it's going to be able to withstand that. And that's why the flux is really good, because that flux is going to make it really hard to make it come off. Now see that, as you can see, that wire is a little bit too long. Otherwise it's going to bow like this right here. It's going to kind of bow. So I'm going to go ahead and just clip a little bit more off so it's about even. Like that. Alright, and then we'll get some more solder. And get it attached, if I can. Okay, that wasn't too bad actually. Oh, and try not to inhale the fumes from that flux. It's not dangerous, but it'll kind of hurt your nose. It is a pretty strong scent there. Alright, now that's connected well. Next, what I'm going to do, this is another optional. You don't even have to, in fact, you can just leave it just like that if you wanted. But because I'm kind of a little bit of a perfectionist, I use this shrinkable rubber tubing. And then I'm going to actually take it and cut a piece and slide it up over the wire. Now, electrical tape will work just fine too. And like I said, you really don't have to use anything, because when you mount these in here, you're going to use best option is to use hot glue, which is what I do. And once you hot glue everything, just make sure you hot glue it all around in here, and that way there's no chance of if it moves, for the connection to bridge a little bit and then short it out. But if you do have some of this rubber tubing, you're just gonna just cut a little piece off like this, and then I'm gonna try to slide it on here. Just like that. Now I don't really know what the official way to do this is, but I just use my soldering iron and just kind of melt it a little bit. And you will have to work it on there just a little bit around that resistor. Don't worry though, if you've got a good connection, it shouldn't have any problems with you ripping anything off. I mean, I guess you could if you're really rough on it, but kind of just slide that up a little bit more. Okay, and that's probably about as good as I'm going to get it. And then you see there's still a little bit exposed, but at least you get some of this down here covered up, and it's not quite as tacky as just leaving it. And so I'll just shrink all this up with my soldering iron now. Just kind of go over it some. Till it's shrunk up around it pretty well and good and snug on there. This is something good if you plan on doing this a lot, but if you're just doing this for your console, you really shouldn't do this. You should just, because you're gonna, I mean, that's just one extra thing you're gonna have to go out and buy and spend some extra money on. And I'm sure that most of you would prefer to do this as cheap as possible. And since you never really are going to see these LEDs, it really isn't going to matter. Let's get this shrunk up a little bit more around here. That's right around my resistor, though. It don't need much. Okay, that looks pretty good. It's going to be nice and snug on there. I'm sure there's a much more professional way of doing that to get it a little more even, but I just do it that way because, like I said, you really ain't going to see it. Now we'll get ready to show you how to mount it. Let me grab my DVD drive power cable, if I can find it. And of course it don't. Ah, here it is. And this is the power cable I'm referring to. Okay, and it kind of plugs in like this. This goes into the motherboard, and then this end goes into the DVD drive. Let me make sure I'm right on that. Yeah. And this video is actually. You're probably going to see some choppiness here in a second, because I'm probably going to have to do 2 segments and cut them together. Because it's getting a little long and I'm going to fill up my SD card here. Alright, hopefully there wasn't too much choppiness there. I had to do a little cut. What we're about to talk about is how to mount these LEDs to the power source, which is the DVD drive cable, which is going to make it a lot simpler for you. Like I was showing you before, the cable plugs in here in the motherboard, and then this is what plugs in. You can kind of see by the shape that that's how it works. So we're going to say that the motherboard is here. The way this works is the wires on this side, on the farthest side out this way, are the ones you're going to connect it to. Let's see if I can pull these out. Okay, so just keep in mind it plugs in like this, and this plugs into the back of the DVD drive. The cable, there's 2 cables in a line in the back row of wires. This cable right here, this is the one that's on the right side. This is your positive cable, and this is your negative cable, your ground cable. So this is the one you'll attach, make sure to attach the positive to, and etc., etc. There's 2 ways you can do this. You can either physically cut the wire and strip off each end and then attach it all together, or you can just simply take a stripper and try to just strip it up while it's connected, which is what I'm going to try to do. If not, I'll do it the other way. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't work. So we're just going to kind of strip about halfway up. It's kind of working. Alright, let me... Okay, now you can see that's exposed, and that is our positive wire. Almost pulled it out of the socket. That wouldn't have been good. Alright, so now we got that exposed, so we're going to take our this and get our positive wire and connect it to this. Just like so. Now, actually, I'm going to go ahead and cut it because it's going to make it a lot easier for me to put the rubber tubing on these. And this is where you really need that rubber tubing, just to make sure that nothing gets bridged and shorts out, because it could fry your console if it shorts out while it's powered. You know, it wouldn't be a guaranteed thing if it got shorted out, but it would definitely not help it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut a little piece of rubber tubing first, and go ahead and slide it here on one end. Okay. Now I'm going to take the wires and dip it in my flux. And then I'm going to kind of rub the flux on here a little bit too. Make sure it's on there on both of them. Alright. Now, if you've got multiple, now I'm just showing you one with one LED for time. But, you know, obviously you're going to want more than one LED. So it just works the same way. Just hook all the positives to this and all the negatives to the other one. And then that way, if you want, you can just kind of twist the wire around a little bit. Like that. Until you get the next one. And then you'll put some solder on there. And then you'll take your the other end of the wire and get it on there and solder it all together. And then you'll take this. I put this on the wrong side. This needs to go on this side. Okay. Get that twisted around, and then make sure you add this other end so the DVD drive will get powered. And then after you've got that all done and soldered, I'm not going to do that just because I don't want to. I'm still going to make the other ones for this LED kit. And I'll slide that on there and shrink it up. Okay, and then we'll take this wire, and this will be our negative wire, and we're going to do the same thing. Just cut it and strip it and clean it up. Now, a little tip, I wouldn't use more than, say, 16 total LEDs. I think after that, you can probably put even more than that, but I just would suggest more than 16, and honestly, you really don't even need more than 16. I mean, 16 is going to give you a really bright amount of light in there, and it's going to be more than enough for what you want. So I would suggest doing more than 16. Then after you get all that soldered, all you have to do is just take everything and either hot glue it or super glue it, or even use some of that foam double-sided sticky tape, and you'll be good. And yeah, that's about it. So I hope you guys enjoyed this tutorial. Definitely something that a couple people asked me about and asked me to do. If you want, I may even go into some of the other consoles, like the NES and stuff like that. But it just depends on what people say or what people want. So anyways, I appreciate you watching. Make sure to like and subscribe. Show some support. It does take me a while to get all this stuff set up. And anyways, until next time.